Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's a big number day today. It's our 300th episode, and we're so happy to be bringing it to you live from our home office in Findlay, Ohio. Bringing it to you today with the hopes of continuing over 6 years of midweek roundups that we've been bringing to our international education friends around the world, particularly those of you here in the United States. We couldn't have gotten this far without your support in terms of the positive reinforcement you give me when I see you at conferences, and the kind notes you pass whenever something we talk about here on the roundup really makes it into your daily language. We're going to start today with a thank you, obviously, and a bit of an explanation. When we started the roundup over 6 years ago, I knew there was a hole in our international ed community in the terms of the in-depth discussions we would have on specific topics. These topics of the day that impact what we do outside our own offices, outside the borders of our country, even that impact our lives. I knew there were thoughts I had on these different topics, but I never had a chance or a forum to really discuss them in depth. So we created the Roundup. This is at a time when I was full-time into my consulting business and realized that I needed to be of service to my community. And my community are the international educators in the United States and abroad that I've met over the years and that I've touched virtually without ever meeting them, unless I run into them somewhere at a conference and they comment about the roundup or about the newsletter that we put out each week. These have truly been labors of love, and I know how busy we all get in our work in international education. That's what I've been doing for 31 years. My entire professional career has been in international education. And so my desire through the Roundup, through the newsletter, all the SMIE news Fit to Share that comes out on Mondays, where we get our questions from the news stories of the week. Those two things together have been running simultaneously for 6 years. We've already hit our 300th edition of the newsletter earlier this fall, and this is now our 300th edition of the Midweek Roundup. And I wanted to, some of you who regularly listen to the Roundup, either live or on podcast or on repeat on the different social channels. You may have wondered why we didn't do this earlier, 300th. It's been almost a month since I did the Roundup. And part of the reason for that is I had a heart attack on November 16th, changed my life. I don't have the typical things that you would think for someone who would potentially have a heart attack. I'm not a smoker. I don't have diabetes. I exercise regularly. Don't have other pre-existing conditions. Don't have a family history of it. So for me, it was out of the blue. It didn't feel like a normal heart attack or whatever a heart attack feels like in terms of shooting pain down my left arm and numbness. And fortunately, I recognized it early enough, I guess. Went to the urgent care. They sent me to the ER, and 4 stents later in my heart. I'm now back with you, back live after almost over 3 weeks off to recuperate, to start regaining my strength. Not back up to my running pace yet. In fact, not running yet at all until the new year, but I will be able to get back out there and run. For those who know me well, you know how important that is to me. So this journey over the last 3 weeks since the heart attack has delayed this 300th episode, and perhaps fittingly, now it's coming in December when I have, and after Thanksgiving, when I truly have so much more to be thankful for than ever before. My health, for one. my family who've made and friends in the business and in my community that have made the transition back to normalcy for me a much easier one. And thanks to those folks who brought our family meals in the first few days afterwards. It's truly a community that has around me, around my family, that has really rallied to us, and we're so grateful for everyone who's shared their best wishes in my recovery. So thank you all for being a part of this community. And in the international ed world, we are all interconnected in so many ways. It's a very small world in many ways in international education, no matter where you are. We will see each other again. We will see each other at conferences in the spring, on the road at recruitment trips in the fall. But we'll be back out there again soon. Some interesting news coming up in the next couple of weeks that I'll also share with you before Christmas. So let's get right into it with our 3 questions of the day. And as we do each week, we take the questions that we ask here on the Wednesday Midweek Roundup from our newsletter that comes out on Mondays. And that newsletter is called All the SMIE News Fit to Share. And it is a newsletter that comes out at 9 a.m. Eastern if you subscribe to the email version. And we also have a LinkedIn version that comes out at a little bit later date, or earlier time, at 8:30 Eastern. And this is for those of you who get that, like getting your email or your news through LinkedIn, International Ed News. And that both copies of this week's newsletter are in the chat section on the YouTube channel. And we'll be adding those in later as well to the others. You have these newsletters. If you want to find them, there's an archive of them on our website, smieconsulting.org/subscribe. And if you scroll down to each year is broken down into the different editions of the Roundup. So thank you, and the newsletter, that is where you can get this week's episodes or this week's news. And we hyperlink all the stories that we talk about in the newsletter that are answered in these questions through the comments section as well. So please do subscribe. We now have over 2,200 subscribers between the email and the LinkedIn version of the newsletter. So really grateful for all of you who make that newsletter part of your international edification each week. Now let's get to our first question of the day. And that is, how can you change your international recruitment strategy? If it isn't working, what's the use of doing the same thing over and over again? That's the definition of insanity. We don't want to be doing that. But you need to change. How do you make those changes? Now, there are a lot of prognosticators out there. There are some really great resources that have tips along the way in certain regions, certain countries. But one of the ones that I've relied on quite significantly in my professional career in recent months and years has been the folks at INTED. And they've put out an edition last week that it was very appropriately titled, Need Better Global Recruitment Results? Consider these 12 options. And they've got they broke it down into a kind of a more or less money and time diagram, depending on what the particular tactic is. And it goes through the 12 different things that they see most commonly used to improve recruitment efforts or change recruitment strategy. This is one version of what I'll be sharing today, and there's a couple others as well that you want to take on board as you're developing your own plans or looking to make changes, and that's probably the more significant piece. If what you've been doing isn't working, if you've seen stalls in visa success in certain countries, and everybody experienced it in India this year, so no, you're not alone in that respect, but can you do anything different there to improve or move the needle? So we'll talk about that. So all of these I'll run through each of the 12 that they cover, so you have these available, but the link to the article, the weekly blog, is in the chat as well, so do take advantage of that. First one, online recruitment platforms, recruiting agent network, articulation agreements and dual degree programs, outsourced distance campuses, pathway programs. And those are the ones that they have, if you have significant budget that you can allocate to these initiatives. These are the kinds of things that will be the most significant in terms of the ones that will drive the most significant results. Results drivers for more substantial budgets are digital marketing. The first group of are the ones that are it's not the most budget, is most budgets that they see are the ones that these are the ones that you can do. Most folks are going to be doing online recruitment platforms, developing an agent network, creating articulation agreements and dual degree programs, outsourcing with a distance campus to deliver degrees abroad through transnational education, and then pathway programs. Then the next one, if you have more substantial budgets, the solutions that they suggest: digital marketing, recruitment travel, and overarching agent management services, when it may be having in-country representatives or more significant agents that are kind of provide recruitment services as well as finding applicants for you. And then if you have larger budgets, and it's like everybody's budget, larger budgets, more supersized budgets. These are the different categories they break them into. So for larger budgets, and this is one that is probably a luxury item for most institutions these days, would be an in-house ESL program that offers those kind of foundation courses to prepare students for English, full English degree studies. Then outsourced remote recruitment desks. This could be recruitment agencies that will do direct recruitment, where you can lease space in their office kind of approach to if you can have multiple locations, even better. Hiring, but does require regular check-ins as well, so to make them truly productive. And for those that have the biggest budgets, fully owned remote recruitment offices, and this is having a China office, an India office, a Middle East office, a Latin American office, whatever it might be. Then the last would be fully owned distant campuses, and like this would be the NYU's Abu Dhabi campus, their Shanghai campus, could be Duke's Kunshan campus in China. Temple's had a Japan campus for years. Webster University has campuses all over the world. All of those are opportunities. So Integ kind of breaks those 12 down for you in terms of where the ones that can best move the needle are. So definitely check that article out. The second reference piece I would share with you is from our friends at QS, and they talk about leveraging insights to boost international engagement and enrollments in the United States. And it's a very specific one, talking about pre and post-pandemic flows and how the gap has narrowed between U.S. as clear number one to UK, Canada, and Australia as well. And we've talked about what's happening in those other countries that will likely knock their numbers back down, but also ours are going to continue to rebound past pre-pandemic levels. So they have pieces in there about the elections and outcomes, but they break down their suggestions to what institutions can implement to what they call recruitment resilience. These are 5 levers that they've identified that can be pulled. First up, understand and strengthen your reputation. And this ties in self-servingly to their rankings, the QS World Rankings, in that they give an example of ASU, Arizona State, whose academic reputation rank went from 43.4 in 2021 to 2025's 48.6. So I guess the higher it went, the better reputation is, I guess. And then they also show their international student enrollment numbers going from 8,800 to over 10,000 in that same 4-year span, 13% increase. Their second lever is aligning strengths to recruitment markets. So looking at what is valued most in different regions of the world or countries of the world. High quality teaching, good reputation, specific programs, welcoming to international students, scholarships, and well ranked. Those are kind of 6 categories that QS identifies, and how those 6 categories are rated in Europe and East Asia, for example. So they are clear that high quality teaching is most important for Germany, Spain, and France. UK, it's 2. But more important for UK audiences is the reputation for chosen subject. Whereas in East Asia, high quality teaching is second in Korea and Taiwan, first in Japan, but reputation in the subject is most important there. So again, looking at what works in different markets, and there's other data sources. Study Portals has great country level data or even city level data on what majors are most highly sought after, whether it's the greatest unmet need, supply and demand kind of concerns where they're not being met in country, that you might be able to step in and get a piece of that pie. So there's always student survey data that will show differences per country, per region, so that's also worth getting your hands on. The third lever QS identifies is optimizing your program portfolio. And that is talking about, well, we all know how STEM designated degrees in the US have been particularly valuable because of the extra work permission that's available. So opportunities to highlight those STEM options in the United States and potentially with partners in different countries for dual degrees, that type of thing has great opportunity. The fourth lever, activate strategic brand building. And that is talking about 3 things. Is the market a match for your institution's strengths, and looking at each market individually? Is there a long-term potential in the market that you're looking at as a sustainable source of students? How long have your competitors had a brand presence in that market? All of these things are kind of the brand building pieces that relates to your website, official website, rankings, online search results, social media, and then institutional information sessions and fairs that you might do. So those are the 5 most useful sources that students have found indispensable in their search for universities. And the 5th lever QS identifies is deliver an exceptional experience. And this is probably one that I would think will be much higher on the list, and it certainly is one that in what we were doing at UNLV when I came on board 3.5 years ago, and we started the internationalization process, developing a plan, and starting with what I call starting with the end in mind, and that is we want our international students to become successful alumni of our institutions, and that doesn't happen by itself. It happens by intentionally focusing on their needs throughout their journey, from initial prospect all the way through to successful alumni. And all that way through that journey, we have to have services in place. Obviously, the orientation process, arrival on campus is key, and not only the admissions process, but in those first few days and weeks. But beyond that, to housing, to advising, to career services, to student employment, to alumni offices. All of these will play important roles in the journey of international students on your campuses. And if those services aren't being delivered and their experience isn't an overall positive one, those are missed opportunities that can negatively impact the students that you have coming in, because the students that are graduating or leaving the university and not having the best experiences are not going to speak highly of you to their juniors, to their family and friends when they get back home, or as they communicate in real time on social media. That's thousands of conversations that happens that you never see that could be negatively impacting your university's reputation because you haven't delivered on services. So I absolutely agree with this fifth and final lever that QS identifies. Now, in terms of levers and the 12 strategies that were identified by the team at INTED in their blog, there's always going to be other things that you can and should be doing. No list is ever going to be complete. But one piece, an overall arching strategy that should impact what you do is one that the folks at Oxford International Education Group and a good friend and colleague Rajika Bandari, who used to be at IAE running Open Doors in their research division and has been on her own, has her own consulting company now for the last several years. But she has helped co-author a white paper with OIEG, and it focuses on the theme of a lack of diversity spells adversity. So this is something that in the U.S. we've talked about this for months, if not years, about how important it is for us not to have all our international recruitment eggs in one country basket, or even two country baskets. We all know that China and India are the top two most populous nations in the world, but also the two biggest senders of students by a long way over the third and fourth ranked countries sending students abroad. So we have to become reliant in many cases for half or more of our international students on campus from those two countries. The SMART institutions have been able to broaden that beyond, so it's not 50% or more, it might be 30% or more of their international students might be from those two countries. So for example, at UNLV, we're currently running at about, of our 1,200 international students, approximately 300 are from India and China. The rest are from 91 other countries. So we do have a very diverse population where no two beyond those two countries dominate our international student population. So what do the folks at Oxford in this white paper, along with Rajika Bandari, say we should be focusing on? Is that looking at key emerging countries where that will be good sources for the U.S. India is on this list of 4 primary ones: India, Vietnam, Nigeria, and Pakistan. In terms of diversification, obviously South Asia and Africa are South and Southeast Asia and Africa are on this list. But India in and of itself is a very diverse country. Anyone who's visited there beyond Hyderabad will see and realize very quickly how different the student groups are that you see at international schools, at engineering colleges in Hyderabad, at Asian events in other cities in India. You'll see very different kinds of students there. And that there's diversity within India for sure, diversity within China to a lesser extent, but it exists there as well. But in these other countries, Vietnam, Nigeria, Pakistan, you see populations there, and Nigeria is obviously one of many countries in Africa that will dominate the global headlines into the next 20 years. Because of their growing youth populations. All over Africa, it may have 40% of the world's under 30 youth by 2040. Those numbers are just mind-boggling, and that we hope in the U.S. at least we have policy that catches up with this reality in Africa, that we need to be better meeting the needs of those audiences for them wanting to come to the United States, and think about our visa processes there that clearly leave a lot to be desired in terms of overall visa success rates on our college campuses. So we look at this the data from these 3 resources from QS, from Oxford, and from INTED, and you see a lot of different opportunities here. Some of them may resonate with you, some may not, but at least there are. Not every plan will include all of those elements, but certainly diversification should be on your map, regardless of where you are. You need to be looking at, depending on your budget, low-cost options, mid-cost options, high-cost options, and being able to put together a plan, putting together a funding mechanism for how you're going to continue to do what you do on international recruitment and admissions beyond just an existing budget line that you may or may not have. So it's certainly something I can relate to. But having identified approaches that will meet your abilities in the current situations and allow you to pull the levers that make sense for you to pull, and to get the data, have the data in your back pocket that will allow you to make informed decisions about where you need to be focusing your recruitment attentions in terms of countries, but also your dollars in terms of how you spend that. Now let's move on to the second question of the day, and that is, what happens when a state bans relationships with China? And this is altogether too common a reality that particularly red states are beginning to grapple with. We saw the occasion last year with Florida, with the ban on partnerships with China. Any kind of contractual relationships in China have been forbidden by state law, and that has impacted existing relationships. I shared earlier that there was a relationship that with a Chinese college that one public university in Florida had, that they were doing a kind of a 4+0 program completely in China, that they were desperately looking for someone to take that program on, and that may or may not happen, but it's become a kind of a lightning rod situation for institutions and public institutions in red states. And Florida got the brunt of it last year. Texas just got the hammer dropped on them last Wednesday when the governor basically implemented a no China policy for public institutions that does a number of different things. It was an executive order right before Thanksgiving that is supposed to safeguarding public agencies, including higher education institutions, from the influence of the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. There are concerns the directive could hobble academic engagement between Texas College and a country that remains a major source of international students and a critical research partner. So that's from Karen Fisher's Latitudes column article on this last week. And Texas has tied, the Texas governor's tied this order to a U.S. Department of Commerce list of foreign governments that, quote unquote, are engaged in a long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the United States. And there are basically 5 countries on that list: Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Russia, and China. Now, that means what public colleges and agencies are not able to enter into or renew contracts with companies or institutions in China that are owned or controlled by regulatory bodies in these countries. Now, faculty and staff cannot participate from these public colleges, cannot participate in talent recruitment plans like China's 1,000 Talents program. There are agencies educational agencies now can't be contracted with because they receive licenses from the government, and that is considered a relationship that are owned or controlled by regulatory bodies in China. So their travel there is no longer available, that travel to and receiving gifts from Chinese sources no longer allowed. It is a very significant challenge that these Texas colleges, being at AirC last week, that colleagues at North Texas certainly shared their frustrations that this is going to hamper their abilities. They've got over 8,000 or 9,000 international students now, and India is by far the number one, but China's not has been high on that list, and now they have to find other ways to bring students in from behind the Great Wall. So that's what's happening in Texas this week, and a lot of colleagues that you might know, spare thought for them, because they're struggling with this now. particularly on the international admission side, and certainly study abroad programs are all affected and basically impossible now in China. So let's move on to our final question of the day, and it will be a quick one on the fallout for Australian institutions in the post-ESOS bill era. And for those not familiar, in Australia there have been two things that have dominated the landscape of discussion in Australia for the over the last year, and that one is a ministerial directive, and that came out. It's called Ministerial Directive 107, and that came out basically a year ago in December. That was an immigration framework that classifies Australian institutions into different risk levels and offers preferential treatment in terms of how many visas might be given to low-risk institutions. And that directive led to a significant spike in visa rejection rates for students from some countries, especially for providers that were assessed to be higher risks. And these providers are a lot of the vocational colleges and institutions in Australia. Now, that was a year ago when this process started with the ministerial directive, and there was as a result of that, since December last year, there has been a 30% drop of student visa applications from students offshore looking to come to Australia. And institutions have been struggling after that directive was put in place. Now, in the last few months, there has been a Senate bill in the Australian Parliament called ESOS, that would put in place very specific caps, put over an overall 275,000 cap on new internationals coming to Australia in the next year in 2025. That would give specific percentages to universities that they would have to adjust their intakes and admission rates to be able to handle. That bill just failed to pass out of the Australian Senate. So as a result, the government now has gone back to the Ministerial Directive 107 that had been putting in place this significant spike in visa rejection rates because of the classifications on low risk, high risk, and everywhere in between. So that is that's an ISIF Monitor report that gives you some of those details there on what that looks like. There's also another article from the PI on what some of the providers are doing now. One in particular, Australian Catholic University, had actually closed their international admissions in the anticipation of the ESOS bill passing. But now with a return to the ministerial directive, they've actually already had cut their international student commencements by 53% in 2025. And in terms of their confirmation of enrollment forms that they had sent out, because they were at risk, because they had issued significantly more than their allocated cap, so they stopped their international admissions. Now, with the ESOS bill not passing, they're looking to reopen that, but they're claiming that, hey, the bill has done, even though it didn't pass, the bill has damaged Australia's reputation as a destination of choice for international students. That's from Chris Riley at ACU, Australian Catholic University. And there are a lot of other universities that also are expressing their severe concerns with what the future will hold. And like with any of these things, we saw this in the U.S. in early 2017 after the Muslim travel bans went into place. We might be seeing round 2 of those coming up in the next month after Inauguration Day. But that, even though they were Muslim travel bans, there were exceptions carved out for students. The implications and the effect of them were felt well beyond those 7 countries that were identified, only 5 of which were Muslim majority. But we saw that the damage that was done as a result. So what we will anticipate, Australian institutions, Canadian institutions, UK institutions that are also struggling with these other significant reputational damage decisions made by governments, is that the impacts will be far-reaching and won't be just a flash in the pan. They will last for years. 1, 2, 3, 4 years or more. So this is a time in the world of international education where major destinations are dealing with some real issues and are struggling to maintain their momentum, and are forcing to retrench and recalibrate and reorganize themselves in a way that will allow them to regain some of the momentum lost and the student volume lost. All of us are going to be a long way off doing that if our governments continue to take the action that they have been. So we'll see whether it lasts, but I did not anticipate 6.5 years ago when I started these roundups I'd get to 300. I didn't think I'd get to 30. But we've made it this far thanks to all of you who've been a part of the conversation, and we really look forward to continuing this conversation in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks all for being a part of